Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Jinnah Institute series on democracy and multiple other subjects that we've been bringing to you. And today we're honored to have with us an academic, Afiya Zia. We're going to have a candid conversation around some of the themes that we are routinely confronted with but don't really understand because they're theoretical, they are stuck in jargon we don't necessarily understand, but they do have direct implications on who we are and how we think in society that is on the move and in constant transition in Pakistan. Afiya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The first question from me would be, what is the feminist project within democracy?
So partially, feminism in Pakistan has been intertwined with democratic movements or a push or lobbying for the return to democracy, really. Because I would say that perhaps the feminist departure from women's rights, from normative women's rights issues, date back to even from partition, really, right?
Yeah.
Been several waves of it. But I think the feminist departure came around General Zia-ul-Haq's dictatorship, and it took on a more radical flavor, more radical characteristics. But the intertwining was important because it sent the message out that feminism means more than just democracy, right? More than just a return to democracy. It means influencing what kind of democracy is going to be.
Right.
So that was one thing. I think the other coincidence or other influence on Pakistani feminism and its relationship with democracy was, of course, the fact that it was Benazir Bhutto, the first woman prime minister in the Muslim world, who took on a very sort of she caught the imagination of women and marginalized and peoples, and was an important symbol for religious minorities also. Mm-hmm. Now, since we had undergone Islamization campaign, the religion question also became intertwined at the same time. So it's a very interesting seed. The seeds of feminism and democracy are intertwined with other strains, if you like. The project, I think, then became and continued until General Musharraf's time to do with how many women we can get into politics, right? Mm-hmm. How many women will be leaders in parties? Because obviously it wasn't just one Benazir Bhutto. There was, at that time in South Asia, other women prime ministers in Muslim world also. Yes. In Turkey as well at that time. So I think that idea of women being in politics caught the imagination of the region and made the democracy project, if you like, as you ask, a compelling one. But it wasn't at grassroots levels, if you like. So the NGO movement became then very involved with democratizing the ground, democratizing and preparing the ground for women to emerge as leaders rather than being dynastic leaders or coming from top. So I think that's an ongoing project. It's a very interesting history. Aisha Khan's book on women in politics and the women's movement addresses a lot of these issues. And what's interesting now, and that's also part of the feminist project, is we must document this history. And feminists have perhaps produced the richest literature of the Zia-ul-Haq period. And now there's a lot of literature coming out because they're younger feminists. Feminism is taking on is going in different directions now. It's not just focused on the state, on democracy, on political parties. So I think that expansion of feminist interests beyond just the democracy question. But it's a good time to be asking this question because today Maryam Nawaz has just been arrested, and yesterday I was saying at your event that, she is going to emerge in some form or manner as an icon of democratic possibilities, options, alternatives.
So Afiya, about icons, and you mentioned Benazir and Maryam Nawaz is also leading through Punjab. Icons have been accused of kicking the ladder from under them. They're also accused of tokenism, women leaderships, and one can be cynical about this in so many ways. There is also a critique of having women in parliament who don't necessarily do anything. These are questions that we have answered to some extent. This is one. And number two, is representation and having more women in parliament in positions of authority necessarily a feminist one?
It's not necessarily a feminist one, or it's not exclusively a feminist one, let's put it that way, but it is necessary. If you don't have women in politics And if you don't have women representatives at within any political institution, let's not just say just parliament, but in any state institution, you'll notice, as we do in Pakistan, if you don't have them in planning and development, that whole department is gender blind. And the same applies to every institution. So it's critically important. I mean, if the corporate sector in the United Nations gets it, certainly the Pakistani state and government can too. So, but why it's important, perhaps there's more stress on it with regard to legislature, is that when you make laws, it's not just how the final law that matters. It's the entire process that goes into it. And critical in that is the engagement of legislators with movement and with women who they are supposed to be representing. That connectivity, that dialogue if you look at every single law that's been passed in Pakistan that is related to women in some capacity or the other, the debates that have gone behind it have been far more important than the outcome.
Right.
So the domestic violence law, it took 8 years to get a law passed, right? But the trials and the ups and downs that it's been through revealed so much. The debate about whether it should be within religion or outside of the religious framework, how much, which province signed first, which province signed last, what it signals. So I think the signaling of lawmaking, the process of lawmaking signals something about what kind of voice and agency women can potentially have and the impact that that's going to have. So every province, so for example, people have this idea that Sindh is an extremely progressive or open-minded or Sufi, the usual stereotypes. And it is. There's no doubt about a certain amount of freedom of presence despite other constraints, but there's also simultaneously tremendous expression of womanhood in the imagination, in folklore, in the culture of Sindh, and in the politics of Sindh as well. But you would think that there would be far more pro-women laws passed, by the Sindh Assembly, but in fact it's been Punjab which has taken the front. So I think it's important to understand what's going on. It's fairly what we think is a conservative, province, has conservative thinking, conservative parties, if you like, and has been slow on the uptake. But I think what the Punjab government realized is women are this incredibly important symbol for progress and for going against the grain. And if you pass pro-women laws, there's a certain legitimacy and a credibility that you carry not just at the local level but internationally also. Right? So you wear it as a badge, as an emblem. And I think the Nawaz Sharif government realized this very quickly. The People's Party government has always been considered certainly not anti-women, at any point. So I think it's taken for granted that the People's Party will pass and be pro-women. But there was a certain interesting competitiveness within Parliament.
That's right.
And we are going to always be the beneficiaries of it, right? If we play it off. So Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has suffered because of this, which is why I worry about, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how tribal women, or women of the tribal areas, if you like, are going to find ways to. They're very interested in politicking and being part of the electoral process. Look at the progress we've made over there. In 2013, there were about 14 polling stations that had 0 women's votes casted. The law changed. So when you ask why is law important, the ECP's Election Commission's law changed, and now unless you had 5% or 10% women's vote in it, your vote gets cancelled. Everybody was on board suddenly. Suddenly everybody's interested in mobilizing women to vote. And there was in 2018, not a single poll where 0 women votes were cast, right? And there's been in Deer, etc., recounting because this is progress. And this is the importance of women's voice. It's leveraging itself for other rights also.
Right.
So that's why, to answer your question, that's why the process of women politicking being taken seriously as voters and as legislators. Now, you may be, and that's our criticism also, that do they represent a certain class politics? That's an inside and outside relationship, a sort of a track 2 relationship.
Right.
So, lady health workers they may not be in Parliament, but they certainly have representatives from Sindh or Jacobabad who they lobby for their rights. Sometimes they're fighting against the government, and then they lobby with the judiciary. So, outside of assembly, we will continue. The movement always continues to find this way. But it's extremely important to have allies in Parliament. Extremely important.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned track 2 as well here. There are certain policy domains that are covertized where, to an extent, where there is no ingress of women, other groups, and not just across the men and women. It's foreign policy and defense in Pakistan is a very, very private affair. What is the feminist narrative in Pakistan, if there is one, on foreign policy and the state as well?
So in the 1980s and 1990s, feminism in Pakistan was completely and very deeply, almost very importantly connected to South Asia. And we used to comment on each other's states, whether it was Bangladesh, India, and there used to be a South Asian feminism, right? And moving on similar themes, thoughts, and a people-to-people talk, people-to-people women's groups, and discussions around feminisms in the region. And it went right up into 1995 in Beijing with the World Conference on Women. There were regional representations. I've seen a steady and weird dismantling of that, partially because of global compulsions like globalization, where we've started looking elsewhere, and that's not a bad thing. You look in other parts of the world for feminist resonance or identities, and a new generation has cropped up, getting influences from all over, whereas my generation grew up under that South Asian identity umbrella. I think the reconnection with South Asia has not happened. We know feminists from my time, but I don't know young feminists, and I don't know if younger feminists in Pakistan or Bangladesh are necessarily connected with each other. Perhaps on social media, perhaps they read each other's novels or fiction or work that is popular, but everyday normative routine politics, even parliamentarians, we used to meet so often across countries. That doesn't happen as much as one would like it to happen. But what's happened is more and more women, as in our country, foreign policy ministers in Pakistan and spokesperson, a few of them, have been women. And I think the importance of that, one always asks, is it, like you said in the beginning, is it tokenism? I don't think it's tokenism. For the first time, I saw men of my father's generation sitting and listening to Jinnah Khan, right? And they had to take her seriously. And they did take her seriously. And I think it broke down this idea of what was being discussed earlier in the session also. Does it always have to be old white men who are important enough or wise enough to hold forth on foreign policy or global policy or economics? Are there such hard subjects that only men can understand? And I think Jinnah Rabbani or Sherry speaking, or Miss Jendra speaking, I think it breaks down this myth that only men can speak on or are able to, or it's such a hard subject or hardcore kind of thing. I like the idea that Jinnah Rabbani had a male advisor, but she was the one who was seen as the leader for it. And and I think it is important for younger women to be encouraged, and I think it will happen. There is no doubt in my mind that more women are joining the civil service, as my bureaucrat friends tell me, and they will become a spokesperson and become important. I don't think it will happen fast enough unless there is a policy push for it, unless feminist groups demand it and encourage each other to become part of it. There's a certain sort of self-doubt also. Because when the spotlight is on feminists, they expect you to get it perfect also. When in their parliament, you'll ask the question, why is she not speaking enough, right? Which you may not ask of a male parliamentarian. So our expectations of feminists or representatives go far beyond those of male judges, bureaucrats, representatives. We expect them to deliver more, and I think that's okay. It'll be a better world if we try and live up to those, but our own expectations, not necessarily male expectations, or not, importantly, not duplicating male foreign policy ideals always. We can challenge that and bring in a different, that's the whole idea of feminizing policy or feminizing the state as well.
Ms. Zia, you always pack in so much in one answer, and we've pulled you out of a conference session. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
With that, thank you very much, and we'll join you on our next episode of the Democracy Series. Thank you.